Hey guys, what is up? It's your girl, Grace Tori, and I'm back with a whole new podcast episode. This podcast episode is very, very special because tomorrow marks 2 years since I posted the official trailer for the podcast, aka little birthday for the podcast. It will be 2 years old, like I just said. Okay, I've had a little too much espresso, sorry. But I thought it would be fun for today's episode to just kind of do a little reflection. I'm going to talk about things that I wish I would have done differently, or also like things that I've learned since starting the podcast 2 years ago. It's going to be a mixture of like podcast things, like tips and tricks, but also just things I've learned since then. I was freshly 23. I also had just graduated my master's program and just moved off of campus, like into a suburban neighborhood. So I was going through a lot then, and it's been 2 years. I've worked like a corporate job. I've kind of come full circle because I actually just left my job, which I had just like, I was kind of in the same place, sort of, when I first started. So I just want to talk about things that I've learned, things that, I would do differently, and just kind of celebrate 2 years. That's a long time. You guys have really definitely seen me grow up. And I think that when I first started this podcast, it was 100% with the intention of like, everyone feels lost when they graduate college. For the most part, I feel lost. And they kind of tell you that when you graduate, everything's going to be perfect and amazing, and you're just going to land this job, and everything's going to be amazing because you got your college degree. And then you graduate, and surprise, it's a lot harder than people tell you. So that was like my whole thing. I was gonna be like this light that like everyone sees, like the light at the end of the tunnel, like this guiding light that's gonna take you through like your experience and make things easier and give you advice, and you're just gonna have me as like your person. And also it was gonna be a community of like people who also feel lost so that we can all feel less alone. And I think that the community thing still stands, and that's something I definitely have as like a pillar of the podcast. I also know that I think I had a hard time admitting when I felt lost myself or I needed advice myself, and I was just kind of like, no, I am like this person who needs to be knowledgeable and have all the answers because that's what I'm giving to you guys. And I think that now I'm really much more like, no, I'm also lost, but we're figuring it out together, and I'm more willing to admit, like, guys, I don't know the answer, but this is what I think. And so, yeah, that's kind of a little summary of how today is going to go. I kind of went ahead and jumped into it a little bit, but that's pretty much it. Before I jump in, don't forget to subscribe or follow on whatever platform you are currently watching or listening on. I upload every single Sunday and Wednesday, and I will have my Instagram and TikTok link down below as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. I'm Grace Tori, and you're listening to That Girl the Podcast. Grab a beverage of choice and settle in, because the new episode is starting now. Like I mentioned, I started the podcast 2 years ago, and I was in a really bad spot, like, mentally, I think. I think that it was just a lot for me because I had always been very academically motivated. Like, I loved school. Honestly, if college was free, I would stay forever and just get like every degree under the sun because I genuinely enjoy learning. I genuinely enjoy school, and I've been that way my entire life. I love the structure. I think it's very, very black and white in terms of like, you get grades, so if you're doing well, you get rewarded, and they're like, hey, you got an A in this. If you're doing badly, you get a bad grade, and like, you know exactly what you need to work on. There's a mentor there every step of the way. And I didn't really consider how hard it would be to graduate and no longer not only have like the black and white of, you're doing a great job, sweetie, you get an A in life. Also, like, you no longer have a mentor. Like, it's not like I have a mentor in, oh my gosh, I need to pay taxes, or oh my gosh, this thing is going on and like I need help. Like, yeah, you have like family and friends and stuff, but there's not someone who is 100% an expert in the topic of like life who can just be like, oh yeah, I've been through that, this is exactly what you need to do, here's the problem you need to work on, come to my office hours and we'll talk it through. Like, there's just not no one like that. There's a therapist, and like I do go to therapy, which I didn't when I first started the podcast, but they're also not the expert in every single thing you're going through, and it's not black and white at all. It's very, very gray. So as someone who was very academically motivated and put a lot of my worth in my academics and heavily leaned on the academic world, I was in for a tornado of life when I graduated. And I think that that put me in a very poor place in terms of emotionally, mentally, physically. Like, I was just not good. I was very, very lost. I felt very, like, unsure. I think that there's just a lot of self-doubt that comes with, like, that time of your life, and I didn't know how to go about it. So I think it really reflected in the podcast because I was teetering between I'm not good at this, I'm not good at podcasting, I'm not good at life. Why would anyone bother to listen to me? And then also, like, I have these very heavily researched topics. I'm so good at this. I have always loved public speaking. I've always done like YouTube or social media or something in some way, and people are really going to gravitate towards me. Why is not that many people like watching? And that is one thing I'm going to say is don't expect your podcast to blow up overnight. It very well could, like it very well could. And you should always be positive and think like, yes, I'm awesome. My podcast is amazing. Like I will one day be at that place. But genuinely, don't be like quitting your job saying I'm starting a podcast and it's going to blow up, because it won't. Most podcasts take right about 2 years to become a full-time thing. And, you know, it'll be 2 years tomorrow for me, and it's definitely very much not a full-time thing. But I think for me, it started out as this is my guiding light. This is my light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm going to be a podcaster full-time, and then I don't have to worry about anything else because this is it for me. Like, I want a podcast. And I think that I still have that drive, and I still eventually want the podcast to be successful. Obviously, like, it would be very silly of me to sit here and be like, oh, I hope that my podcast tanks and no one listens to it. Like, no, I really do hope that it becomes successful in more ways than one. And, like, from a monetary standpoint, I hope that, like, it does bring in income, and I hope that it does get more viewers. But I think that my motivations have changed. Now it's a creative outlet for me, and I love the people who listen to it. Like, I do this for you guys. If, you know, it doesn't matter to me if there's one person listening or there's 1 million people listening. I would still do the same thing because I love you, I care about you, and I want you to feel like you have support from someone, because I know what it feels like to not have support. But I also don't have that, like, fear in the back of my mind, or that, like, aggravation in the back of my mind of like, why isn't this like the most successful thing on the planet? Like, that's just not there anymore for me, because while, you know, I want it to be successful, I would still be here either way. Like, I do it for the love of podcasting and the love of you guys and the community that I have built. So I think that that's a huge mind shift, and I do encourage you, like, if you want to have a podcast, by all means start one, but definitely don't do it with the mindset of like, I'm going to be an overnight sensation, because that probably more often than not will not happen. And that doesn't mean it won't be successful ever. It just means that you may need to have it as a side hustle for a much longer time than you anticipated. Like, years is a very long time. If you are not someone who is just podcasting for years to enjoy it and to have fun with it, and just because it's a good time, like, this may not be the avenue for you, because it could be years. Like, the average time is like 2 years. So that's something I definitely want to say. I think also the podcast has seen me go through a lot of highs and lows. I have been very, 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 like, sad, but I've also been, like, very, very happy. And you've seen both sides of that. You have, like, 100% seen, like, the ups and the downs, the ins and outs. Like, you have been there through it all. And while I may not say, like, this is what's going on in my life, because I do try to keep a certain level of privacy, and I don't want to, like, not just air my dirty laundry, but say that I'm fighting with, like, Josh or a friend or my family. Like, I don't want to air their dirty laundry, so I am very careful about what I say, and I think that I'm very cryptic about what I say sometimes, because I don't want to, like, put someone in a position or put myself in a position where I'm just, like, I don't know, compromising my privacy. But I also think that you guys have seen a lot. I've told you a lot. I mean, I don't typically tell you things before they happen. Like, with my job, I had been looking for a job for at least a year. Like, that's how long I had been unhappy. But when I when I quit my first corporate job, I had been doing the podcast for like a month, and I made the mistake of being like, I'm going to quit and I'm going to focus on the podcast 100% and it's going to blow up. And for like 3 months, I was looking for another job and I was doing the podcast full time. And guess what? Spoiler alert, it didn't blow up, because more often than not, that is typically how it happens. It's a slow start. And so I didn't have income. I was scared. I was stressed. I was by no means relaxed at all. And it taught me a big lesson. Like, I think that I have a tendency to bow out when things get hard. And with my job, I know things got hard very, very quickly. Like, I was in customer service and I was getting screamed at by a lot of people. And this is by no means like the company's fault. This is like a humanity fault. Like, I had people just telling me every day, like, I'm a horrible person, I'm stupid, all this stuff. And that is just like people being entitled. And I put up with that for like a year because I wanted to find the perfect job where I wouldn't be moving around a lot. I would have flexibility. Like I told you guys in my last episode, my laundry list of reasons why you should, or I think it was 2 episodes ago, like my laundry list of reasons of what you should look for in a new position. And that was what I was looking for, and that's why it took me a year to quit. But for a whole year, I was just like, I would say very much depressed. I do have clinical depression, but this was adding to it. And I also was just going through a rough time. Like, it was affecting my relationships. It was affecting my friendships. I was not in a great place financially. I didn't want to get up in the morning and go to work. Like, it was definitely affecting the podcast because from a creative standpoint, I was just not wanting to put in the creativity, the problem solving, the excitement for the podcast. So I was that way for a year, and I didn't talk to you guys about it because I didn't want to say anything until after it happened so that I could come at it from a place of, this is what I learned. But I think it also taught me resilience, because you have to be resilient to go through that. Like, you have to just be like, yeah, it's going to get better, and just put your one foot in front of the other. And that is something that I learned, because you shouldn't quit your job unless you have another source of income lined up, especially in this economy. Like, 100%. 100%. I think that it is like something that's a tough pill to swallow. I've talked to so many people, and I don't know if anyone's happy in their job right now. I think we're all like burnt out, not getting paid enough, stressed out, like everyone. And everyone just wants to quit. And I think that I've had to like tell a lot of people, I know, but you just got to stick it out. And I think that's applicable to a lot of things in life, not just your job. Obviously, if you're in like a toxic relationship or something, girly, run, get out. Like, that is not something you just want to see if it gets better or wait until the right time. Like, there are resources that can help you. But I think that a lot of times we get in our own way. Like, with my podcast, or not the podcast, my job, I got my own way a lot. I was like, I have a lot of avenues. Like, there's businesses I want to start. There's jobs that are available, but what if this happens and I won't have health insurance? How am I going to find health insurance and this and that? Like, there were a lot of things that I could easily inquire about and get the answers, but I was just scared, or I was so burnt out that I didn't want to. And it took me getting out of my own way and saying, no, this is 100% a possibility. You can make this a reality, but you're going to have to put the work in. And sitting down and being like, how am I going to do this, and figuring it out. And, you know, there's people that I've had to reach out to that I maybe haven't talked to in like a couple years and been like, hey, I know that you're experiencing this. Like, can you help me? You know, how are you doing? And like, there's ways to go about that. But I had to kind of get over my own fear and do it. And that's something else I've also learned, and the podcast has really helped me with. I think another thing is I have crippling ADHD. Like, you guys know, I have ADHD, I have depression, I have anxiety, and I have OCD. All of these are diagnosed. And so I can get in my own way a lot. I have a lot of mental things that I have to work through. And one of those things is I don't finish a lot of things that I start. I start them, and when things are going really well, I stick to it. And then things start to go south, and I quit. Like, I'm just like, no longer interested, bored, don't want to do it, don't feel like it. And then I quit. And it's like, I did not want the podcast to be another one of those things. I was like, this is what I want to do, and I still want to do the podcast like full time. That is still a dream of mine. That is still a motivation on my heart. Like, that is still very much there. But I've had a lot of things where I've been like, I'm going to sell this, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to jump on this bandwagon, and I'm going to be successful with this. And things got rough and I've been like, nope, and I've dipped. And so with the podcast, it's a lot of hard work, and I knew that it was going to be hard work. And so I told myself, you are not allowed to quit. You are not allowed to back down. You are not allowed to just give up. You're not allowed to just stop posting and ghost one day. And have there been times when I've had to put my mental health first and say, guys, I need a week? Yes. Have there been times where I've been so busy that I've had to say, guys, this episode's going to be delayed? Absolutely. But I'm still here. I'm still posting. And as someone with mental health issues, I am very, very, very proud of myself for that. And if you are someone who also struggles with similar issues, it's very rewarding. And whether you want to podcast, whether you want to start a business, whether you want to whatever, you can do it. It just takes, like, literally being so hard on yourself at times and saying, you know, get up and do it. I know you don't want to. Your mind is telling you not to. Your mind is telling you that you can't, but you can. And so that's something I also want to say. Like, the podcast has been a huge challenge for me to push myself. And it's pushed me to know that I am capable of doing things. Maybe I don't do them 100%. Like, there have been episodes I have 100% half-assed. And there have been episodes that I haven't been proud of. And there have been episodes that have been really short. And I've been like, I could have talked about that for 20 more minutes. But 100%, that's something that you should really think about. And you can definitely apply to your own life. I think also with the podcast, I have 100% gone into it thinking like I'm gonna have all this amazing equipment because I have a YouTube background. So I came into it being like, I have to have the best mic, I have to have the best camera, I have to have the best lighting, I have to have the best studio, and none of that is true. I have filmed in the craziest places, and I have filmed with the craziest lighting. I've filmed with no mic. I actually prefer to use no mic. Like, I have my mic right here, but I don't use it. Fun fact, it's not turned on. I do all of my sound production, post-editing, or post-filming. I do it all in editing, and I think it sounds fine. Like, obviously it could sound better, but for considering I don't have, like, a professional studio, yeah, and I noticed that the mic sounds very similar to the mic on my camera, and I have a nice camera. I have a Canon G7X, so I was like, you know what, let's do that. I also don't use my lighting a ton of the time. I have access to a light. It's literally sitting next to me right now, but I prefer natural lighting, and so that's what I do. And I've noticed it doesn't have a huge impact on what videos do well and what videos don't. Like, my videos that do well typically have worse lighting, and the setup is not, like, anything amazing, versus the ones that I'm like, yes, that is the editing, that is perfect, like, that is exactly how it's meant to be. Like, coincidentally, those are just not the ones that have gone well. They've done great, like, they've done, like, average, but the ones that have gone viral, it's really had nothing to do with the lighting or anything. And I'm usually talking about YouTube, because I do have video options on Spotify, like, you can watch this on Spotify, and then everything else is just purely audio. But YouTube is where, like, I feel like it makes the most difference. And yeah, I've noticed that the ones where, like, the focus hasn't been on the video aspect are the ones that typically do well, which is kind of funny. So just go into it. I think that the more passionate about the topic you are, the more excited you are, the more, like, happy you are to be there and present you are in the room, the more successful something's going to be. Whether that's a podcast, whether that's a job, whether that's a business, whether that's a friendship, like, the more present and happy you are to be there, the better it's gonna go. And that's just the way it is. I don't know. It's one of the things that is, like, the magic of the universe. But that's just how it is. I don't know. I feel like there's more to talk about, but I don't know. I think that I went from this being an advice thing, and it still very much is an advice thing. I do give advice. It's also a personal diary. It's also a fun place to talk about silly, goofy things like Reddit submissions and boys and skincare and all these silly things, like, that are interesting to me and I think interesting to you guys. And I think that that's a fun place to, like, stay. Like, this has very much become more of a personal diary for me to look back on that also has topics that I think you guys would be interested in and you guys usually are interested in. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. It may be a little bit on the short side. I could talk forever, but I don't really feel like that's necessary. This is just like the anniversary episode. Like, thank you so much for sticking around, whether this is your first episode listening or you've been here since June 24th, 2022. I love you, I appreciate you, and I would love it if you stuck around even longer. Like I mentioned, I am here as a community for women who have big goals, maybe feel lost in life, and feel like they need a shoulder to lean on. We want to reach our goals together. We're very ambitious. That's what I'm here for. So if you also want to join us, then go ahead. Like I mentioned, follow on whatever platform you're currently listening on. Leave a rating and review. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you want to hear or see on the podcast in the next year. Also, don't forget to follow on Instagram and TikTok. Like I mentioned, that's linked down below. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I will see you guys in my next podcast episode. Bye, guys.
You was the first